Right now is morning. I'm currently sitting in a hotel on the road in the northwest of England, where I've been moving from client to client, working on a number of different innovation or creativity or cultural or vision workshops in order to try and move our customers, our companies, clients forward in some way. But it got me thinking that, at work, we're often so focused on getting through our tasks, getting through our day to day life, and moving from task to task that we really rarely take time to seek new inspiration. And the challenge with that is that when we face these new problems or new opportunities, we can fall into the trap of applying the same old situation to a new challenge. And I think it was Henry Ford who said, "If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got." The challenge with that is that we need a jolt sometimes. We need a kick to help us to look outside of our own world so that we can see new possibilities to existing challenges. And here at the Innovation Beehive, we spent some time studying or working with some of the world's most innovative companies in order to find inspiration. And we've done that, and what's come out of that has been the must bees of innovation culture. Now, over the course of this recording, I'm going to introduce these principles and show how successful organizations have lived them out and embraced these must-be's of innovation culture in order to gain a competitive advantage in their own markets, or in order to become more successful in their own markets. And by thinking about these behaviors and these must-be's, you, I, I urge you to challenge yourself to look at ways that your organization might well live them out too, either as an organization as a whole, or even as a leader. You'll be able to align yourself with these must-be's of innovation culture, and you'll be able to encourage and enforce and enable and make innovation absolutely inevitable and natural for your organization. So the first one is be clear about who you are. And at the Innovation Beehive, you may have heard us talk about this before, we regularly talk about the duvet chuck moment. And that's the thing which inspires our people at the Innovation Beehive to jump out of bed on a Monday morning and come to work. It's the reason that we get out of bed with a smile on our face, no matter what kind of mood we've woken up in. And it's absolutely essential when you're developing a culture of innovation that an employee is inspired, completely inspired to get out of bed in the morning. Because if they're not inspired to come to work on a Monday morning, how can we expect them to be inspired to come up with some amazing and creative ideas during the rest of the day? So it's absolutely essential that as an organization, in developing a culture of innovation, you're clear about who you are, and you find a way of giving your people a reason to get out of bed, for chucking that duvet out, for inspiring them to leap into their day. And as a manager or a leader of that organization, you personally should be able to do that as well. If we think about other companies, IKEA say that they exist to create a better everyday life for the many people. That's much more inspiring than saying something like they're getting out of bed to sell good value, low cost, flat pack furniture. They say they're creating a better everyday life for the many people, and that's enshrined in the way that they operate their business. Google, for example, exists to organize the world's innovation and make it universally accessible and useful. I mean, that's a big statement, but it's enabled the company to evolve from just a search engine into a company which has a plethora of ventures, including Google Mail, Maps, Google Plus, and YouTube. And that's even before we get on to some of the more dynamic innovations that they've come up with in recent years. And if actually you ask Googlers what the purpose means to them, and of course we have, they'll come up with an answer which is aligned to, I get to work on cool stuff that matters. And that really inspires them to jump out of bed in the morning because they're clear about who Google is to them. That's just a couple of examples of how great companies know why they exist. Being clear about who you are as a business or as a team is a great first step on the road to becoming an innovative organization. So I encourage you in your company to dig out that company's vision, which might be on every piece of material that you have, or it might be stuck somewhere on a shared drive, but dig it out and see if it aligns with what you and your team are actually doing. Does it actually say why you exist? Does it encompass that duvet chuck moment? How is it communicated to employees? And how will you inspire your people? Or how have you inspired, or how can you inspire better your people to really get behind it? And once you're clear about who you are and communicating it, then you're on the beginning of the road to being a highly innovative company. The next must be is be clear about who you want to hire. Most organizations, they have an employee branding, or they have a brand positioning statement, but unless it's lived every day, day in and day out by your employees, then unfortunately there's a possibility of it being forgotten. And there's a possibility of it filtering down to the customers that's extremely limited. And that culture about who you want to hire and attract and retain, if it's not taken up by the employees, then they're not likely to be passionate advocates of the brand and the business, and nor are the customers. So we need to be absolutely clear about who are those people we want to hire, because that culture is built and sustained by your people. And to get the people right, and to get the advocacy of the brand right, in order to translate it into a differentiated customer experience and drive brand loyalty, we can look at a couple of other companies who've gone about this in perhaps some unusual ways. Quite a well-known one, of course, is Southwest Airlines. And they want to deliver positively outrageous service. So that's positively outrageous service. And I'm sure that you've seen some of the videos on YouTube. They see every interaction with a customer as a chance to have a lot of fun, and they encourage a kind of warrior spirit to create innovative customer experiences. And when they're recruiting and hiring people, they look for people who take, of course, their jobs really seriously, but not themselves. They're able to take some fun in themselves. And again, if you haven't seen them, I encourage you to have a look on YouTube, search Southwest Airlines, then you'll see some of their cabin crew rapping, having fun conversations with different customers. I think I saw one where the airplane turned into a kind of disco. So it's clear that they're differentiating themselves in their hiring process from some of their competition. If we look again at IKEA, one of their key behaviors, going to a different end of the spectrum, is to be smart and thrifty. And that's about driving internal efficiency and minimizing waste. And that's because, of course, they want to keep their prices low so they can continue to deliver that better everyday life for the many people. And during their recruitment process, they ask potential recruits about the interest rate on their credit cards or on their mortgage. And that's not because they're prying into the private lives of people, but it's because they assume that smart and thrifty people know detail about how much interest they're paying on their debts, and they have a grip on that sort of thing. If we think about Virgin Money, they're on a quest to make banking better, and they realized they needed a more creative mind to achieve it, so they recruited for what they called a creative genius. The assessment center for that job included a couple of interesting different hiring things. One was a simulated locker room, and at halftime, candidates were tasked with coming up with a motivational pep talk on the spot. Another room during the assessment center had a grand piano in it, and candidates were invited to have a go at playing the piano with a complete stranger. And it wasn't about testing their ability to play, but their determination to get stuck in and be creative with it and have a go. So the entire assessment center was designed to identify that creative thinker who isn't afraid to break the rules and step out of their comfort zone. Sometimes the most passionate representatives of your brand are your customers. So King.com, the makers of Candy Crush, they developed a quiz app that people would stumble on whilst they were searching for other games in the App Store. And that game tested both the mindset and ability of players who succeeded in completing all of the levels, and it invited them to submit their CV to the game maker. So that was taking people directly from the customer base who showed promise in actually using the product. Sometimes necessary to disrupt the paradigm of traditional employment to make sure that you are clear about who you want to hire. Another example is the Pentagon's Defense Research Agency. They sought out to prevent and create strategic surprise. And most of their work is, like some of yours, is project-based. So they hired contract performers. And the goal of hiring contract performers is that they brought specific knowledge and very fresh stimulus to the project. And if you've done much work with the Innovation Beehive before, you'll know that we're passionate about getting fresh stimulus to help generate new ideas. And those workers, they're short-term employees, so they weren't really involved in the usual office politics, and career management stripped away so the teams can just focus on getting the job done. And that worked for the Pentagon's Defense Research Agency. And with an emergence of recent generations who do tend to move jobs more regularly than their predecessors, that model could be one way of prevailing, perhaps, in the battle for talent. Your people, however you hire them, of course, are your greatest asset, and they absolutely drive your culture. So we need to think about whether you are clear on who you need to hire to deliver a superior customer experience. We need to think about, do your people love your brand and act as advocates for your brand and business? And we need to think about whether or not your organization structure makes it possible to find the right people when you need them, however creatively you choose to find them. The next must be in your customer's shoes. It's often the case that the further up the management tree we go, the less we actually get to know our customers. We create a kind of distance between us and the customers. And again, it might not be true for all of you, but certainly I challenge you to think about, when was the last time you actually spent quality face-to-face time with your customers? Not just a focus group or looking at survey or questionnaire answers, but actually got to spend some time with them. Again, Henry Ford said if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. It's not enough just to ask the customer things. We need to be alongside them to see how they operate and what they really need, so we can interpret it in the right way. And innovation will only deliver growth if it fulfills an unmet and often unknown need. So we need to make sure we really dig deep in it. And that need is often expressed non-verbally. So the only way to identify it is to be inside the customer's shoes and experience the company just like they do. And at the Innovation Beehive, we use a methodology called design thinking, which is a really powerful innovation process. And it's done by building empathy with the customer. And if we think about Lynx and Axe use very popular modern culture references in their company, in their internal communications, in order to encourage their people to think like their end users. Google and Tesco and others collect and synthesize data on customer usage to make sure they target online advertising, provide promotions, and make improvements to their software platforms. IKEA, they recognize that many people don't fly, in terms of many people, don't fly business class. So their travel policy is, of course, economy for everyone. The management team at restaurant chain Lock Fine regularly take over the restaurants, work in the restaurants, so that they can receive customer feedback firsthand. And that's really valuable, as it really helps them understand what the customers go through. John Timpson's UK chain of shoe repair and key cutting shops operate an upside down management structure, which means that a huge amount of autonomy goes to the shop staff, and they have an awful lot of power to deliver great customer service. And Timpson says the most important way that you can offer good customer service is very simply to trust your people and give them freedom to get on and do it in the way that they think best. You can't give individual service through a set of rules. And that works for them. So being in your customer's shoes means we need to experience what it's like to be the customer. Asking them isn't enough. So again, I'd love to challenge you on how close are you to your customers? And what structures could you create in your organization or your team in order to get closer to your customers? And how can you role model the importance of customer empathy? The next must be is actually one of my favorites, and it's be rebellious. And be rebellious doesn't necessarily mean being somehow misaligned or badly behaved, but it does mean to some extent challenging the norm. So when asked about working in his laboratory, Thomas Edison is reported to have once said, "Hell, there are no rules here. We're trying to accomplish something." And none of us, I'm afraid, have the luxury of working in environments where there are no rules. But innovation is largely about breaking rules or breaking paradigms or pushing the status quo. So innovative organizations need to be geared towards challenging. They also need to be geared towards playfulness and experimentation if they're being more expansive. Google, for example, you may have come across Google's 10x thinking. The 10x thinking is rather than work on something incrementally, Google would challenge someone to think about it. What happens if we did it 10 times bigger or made it 10 times better? It encourages people to just to see how far they can push the envelope. 10% incremental, small improvements may deliver the right innovation, but it's often constrained by assumptions, tools, and the work that has gone before. So Google really wants to kind of make sure that people go beyond what they thought was previously possible. Organizations that only focus on improving what they already have do often miss those disruptive market trends. In the UK, there was a burger chain which was successful for decades called Wimpy. Wimpy, unfortunately, never saw McDonald's coming. 10x thinking does make Googlers brave. It does empower them to create solutions that stretch the boundaries of current thinking, and it really encourages them to be rebellious. And at Google, they direct that rebellious thinking to address a huge problem, perhaps, or a problem that needs a radical solution. And they do encourage themselves to use breakthrough technology to do that. So pushing that envelope is really, really important to them. The Virgin Group, which at its height owned a very wide range of businesses, from record labels through property and airlines, they had a philosophy in the business that was enshrined in reception with the words, "Screw it, let's do it." Quite rebellious. And that's really set the tone for the business and encouraged entrepreneurial behavior, and it promoted risk-taking. It gave their people permission to break the rules and innovating in the same process. Again, we're not saying that you need to be a high risk-taking business, but something to think about. How far can you push the boundaries? And there's been, as you're aware, there's been a transformation in the media industry in the last decade, with printed media being significantly challenged. And Schibsted, media company in Norway, who had been in print for a long, long time, they saw this coming and they decided on a complete game changer and took the bold decision to kill print. And they took that early, which worked really well for them. And based on that dramatic change in strategy, they created new revenue models earlier than their competition, and they became more sustainable. So being rebellious can be a strategic course to set yourself on, and it can help you respond to a rapidly changing market. So some of the questions you might want to ask yourself are, how far do you encourage your employees to challenge the status quo? And how do your business goals and processes encourage or limit creative rebellion in your people? You also need to ask yourself, is your team or your business ready for the next big disruption in the market? The next must be is be structured. So Google says that creativity loves constraint. Of Google's 9 notions of creativity, I think it's number 7. And Marissa Mayer, who was Google's first female engineer, explained that constraints shape and focus problems and provide clear challenges to overcome as well as inspiration. If we're thinking about innovation, and particularly with a culture of innovation, constraints might not be the first thing that you think of. Lots of leaders they talk about blue sky thinking or expansive thinking. And it's true, of course, if we're thinking about the double diamond innovation model, which you may have come across with the Innovation Beehive before, there's an element of expansive thinking in that. It's important to spread your wings and be expansive, but at the same time, we need an element of discipline and structure. So one structure we use at the Innovation Beehive is whole-brained thinking. And that means that we operate sometimes in the creative world, sometimes in the analytical world, depending on where in the double diamond or design thinking process we are. If our innovations are really going to come to fruition, if our ideas are really going to move the world, then we need to make sure we do use whole brain thinking and see the worlds of creativity and the analytical side in one. So in any innovation process, we need to make sure that there is a sequence and a process. So we might start with the creative world, where we encourage expansive thinking and we start to be rebellious and we start to challenge the norms in order to come up with great ideas. But once we've built up a rich set of creative possibilities, we need to move more into the analytical arena, where we start to filter and funnel our ideas through predetermined lenses around cost, potential market size, organizational capability, and whether or not we can bring these ideas to fruition. So building structures that encourage teams to explore the worlds is important. And we've worked with that kind of structure, expansive and reductive, working through a design thinking process with many of our clients on projects ranging from designing employee attraction or helping companies reorganize and implement a new culture, to developing a project for providing affordable energy in the Niger Delta. And it seems to work for a wide variety of project types. And that structured approach really ensures those clients were able to land those great ideas they had and make it something tangible that could then be put into action. We need to recognize that innovation requires different thinking from day to day. And some organizations have separated their innovation teams from the main businesses. So Google created an innovation lab, which is called Google X. It was led by Sergey Brin. And that business unit had the freedom to shoot for the moon, of course, using Google 10X. And some of their innovations have included the Google Glass, the driverless car, Project Loon, which was that was an ambitious project to deliver internet to everywhere on the globe. So if you think, for example, in Africa, I think the plan for the wide plains of Africa was to deliver internet from the sky, from a balloon, something like that. So, some extraordinary innovations coming out of there. And it might not be right for you to work in that way, but some companies have put structures in place all across the business. The Post-it note, that we all know and love, was stumbled upon when Art Fry, a scientist at the company, was out to work on projects that interested him, and he developed the product into one of the biggest sellers in the business. So he did that more or less by accident. W.L. Gore took it one step further, and they developed an internal economy where associates could bid for one another's time to work on projects. And that really ensured that talent was deployed incredibly effectively. So Companies have structure in order to help innovation, but sometimes it's the structure outside of the structure, which Yanni at Google, the strategist at Google, calls the dark matter. And innovation does need the structure, but it needs to be aligned to the business goals. It needs to be aligned to the culture we're trying to create. So in your own company or in your team, how do you actually staff or empower or structure your teams to innovate? And how do you encourage them to really find the challenges and processes? How do you signal to them that your people have the permission to innovate? And how much time do they get to do it? If we think about our culture and having an innovation culture, we really need to be clear about who we are to the people, as we saw earlier, so that they can bring the culture to life in the business. Being upfront about the culture is more than just an internal comms issue. In educational psychology, there's a concept called incidental learning, and people learn most of what they come to know outside of formal learning settings. So everything from how long it takes you to reply to job applications to the color of your office walls informs what people understand your culture to be. We mentioned before that culture is really led by the people, which is true. But there are other smaller, often tangible items which also inform people of culture. So at the Innovation Beehive, we say gray Formica offices give you gray Formica ideas. The work environment is a vital component to culture. People do make judgments of culture based on the environment they're in. And Google has micro kitchens, which encourages collaboration over coffee. Dyson has installed a Harrier jump jet in its head office, and that encourages people to think about great engineering. Lego has innovation rooms, which are completely white, completely devoid of color. So it's a blank canvas for creativity. And culture is informed by the spaces people work in. And communications, the way the culture is communicated through the business, is the way of moving that message through the company. Innocent Drinks encourages playfulness at work by calling their customer helpline the banana phone. A small thing, but again, it's redolent and indicative of their culture. Apple, of course, we all know their customer service desk is called the much more exciting and inspiring Genius Bar, and it encourages a whole different behavior in technical teams because it recognizes the value they bring to customers. If we think about the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group, in their morning huddles not the right word for it, they have a kind of lineup meeting, and the whoever's holding the lineup meeting calls the staff ladies and gentlemen in quite a formal way, because when they talk about ladies and gentlemen, they talk about them serving ladies and gentlemen. So the statement defines the relationship employees and guests have with each other, and it's one of mutual respect. So many organizations enshrine their culture in their values, and at their best, values are a reflection of the positive aspects of culture, perhaps with a bit of stretch, and employees can't relate to the values as organization sets. If they can't, then those values will slip into obscurity. So values and culture need to go hand in hand. Back to King.com, the owners of the inventors of Candy Crush, they relate their values directly to their product offering, and those values are care and craft, creative champions, fast and fluid, humble and open, and fun and friendly. And by aligning the language of those values closely to their offering, the company's also enshrined their culture within the customer experience without even having to say it. So it all runs fluidly together. And if you want people to innovate, innovation needs to be part of the culture. Being upfront about that culture, whether it's in the spaces, in the environment you give people to work, or in the language you use, or in the values you have, it will make an impact as long as you live it, live it, live it. So again, I urge you to think about how upfront are you about the culture you have or you want in the business, and how clear are you about how that will drive your success, and what structures, processes, and communications do you have in place to bring your culture for life? So those must-be's of innovation, the six must-be's, we believe will absolutely help you to drive your business forwards in creativity and innovation. And those structures that you have in place to help you be more innovative are the ones which will help you have a super engaged team and therefore much happier customers.